Okay, welcome everyone once again. Such a pleasure to see all of you. Just to recap, this has been a lecture series because just the avian diversity in our area is just so wonderful. Just to try to squeeze it into a talk or two or three, it just seemed like a neat idea. Well, why don't we try to be comprehensive over the course of say 14 weeks or so? So on that original schedule, we have two more remaining talks. I'm just killing time. No need to run. We're good. um, Today we're going to follow up from last week's mention of the birds of fall and winter with the birds of spring and summer. And then next week is the last scheduled week where we look at environmental issues affecting birds, from climate change to loss of habitat to invasive species to all of these things, pesticides and heavy metals. And so that was the end of what I had planned. However, just talking to you like it was happening earlier this evening, I mean, so many of you have great stories, and birds that people have been saying like there's goshawks and ruddy ducks, apparently in Middletown again. And so I thought that while next week is a presentation like this one, maybe the week after that could kind of be an open or like a town hall type of thing where there's no structure and it's just we start off, like when I play open mics, everyone gets like 3 minutes and then, with as time allows, we'll rotate again. But if everyone, if someone had a picture of a bird you'd like to show, or you'd like to stand up and talk about, an experience, ask questions, and birds, but any type of wildlife, really. If someone wanted to show them, you could email me and, we'll talk more next week. And I'll pull up this is the bird talk if you're interested. Welcome. We'll pull those up and you can talk if these are birds at your feeder or whatever. Just, I know some of you online, have told me about vacations that you've taken where like, oh, I went to, this part of South America where there's the Valley of Hawks where you just have hundreds of these hawks come, and just, I'm sure everyone would love to hear the stories. So just an addition to that. And then also, we're kind of looking, this was kind of an idea to do a series, and I'm thrilled with how it, turned out. I hope you've enjoyed it. I'm grateful for all of you who've come. And maybe next fall, kind of repeat this, but in the spring, had a thought where I think this is it, kind of maybe thinking of like a different lecture series on wildlife so that maybe over the course of the year we would try to hit everything so that starting off with not only different kinds of wildlife but also kind of their fossil history, like introduce like where bacteria and microbes came from, and then microbes we find in our area and like all their different roles, and then winter wildlife, invertebrates from the fossils to the ones we have here, local insects and their fossil history, fish, the first vertebrates to the fish of Orange County, amphibians, the first land vertebrates to the amphibians of spring, bird evolution, bald eagle nesting, migratory waterfowl, reptiles, plants, fungi, their fossil history, mammals, ending with human evolution, and even then maybe ending with this little stairway I put together, kind of a museum-like set of displays on the stairway behind us. So if anyone's interested, I'll have schedules of these like printed out that you can take next time. Also, at some point, it is my dear hope that I'm having two calendars made, if anyone's interested, one with the birds of the Audubon Sanctuary, and I think I might be 2 weeks away from one for the Bashakil. But we could swing something up with like for a donation that would get you membership, then you would also get a calendar or something. So hopefully next week, but if not the week after that, I'll have those. One last thing is maybe if this is your first time here and you leave here and you're saying like, oh, that was fun. If only there was, more chances to connect here. I'm just going to go to two websites very quickly. The local Audubon chapter, the Orange County Audubon Society, they post all of their things. So there's like these talks here that I'm giving, but there was just a great board member, Diane Tuttle, gave a hike at the Liberty Loop last just a couple of days ago. And then I'm going to be trying to do a Liberty Loop field hike to the Liberty Loop where hopefully we can see the short-eared owls on December 10th. Every year we organize a bird count, and the data helps to kind of track trends in in birds. So if you were interested in, getting involved or being a member of the group, that's a great group. The Bashical Area Association, also a great group, and they have, hikes and programs and things like that. So once again, if this is of interest to you, lots of great biodiversity here, lots of people giving talks and leading hikes. And I'm sure, any and all, like I and all the others would love to have you, and I'm sure um, other people would love to, share your company and share their interests with you. So, hopefully, some of this is of interest to you and you can connect. But this is kind of part two from where we were last week. All right, so last week, we traced autumn into winter, and then if we were going into winter, just not all birds will like do something drastic, on March 21st when winter officially ends and spring officially begins. So even though it's winter in February, if you look outside, biologically speaking, you can notice I'm starting to see spring. Or, and there's even a couple springy things going on right now, even though winter, hasn't officially started. One of the things as we get into February and then early March, the snow geese are getting ready to go. So, some of our winter birds, which have been here all winter, and then you say, oh, I've seen a bunch of sparrows that I don't always see. So the tree sparrows and the white crowned sparrows, they're here in the winter. The rough-legged hawks, someone was describing at the grasslands, the Shawangunk grasslands. They've got short-eared owls already, and they've got a bunch of rough-legged hawks. Or they've seen some rough-legged hawks, and they said like a gazillion harriers. So, great place to see there. So there's all of these great birds, and I hope it isn't every year, but most years we get a lot of the snow geese, especially at the Liberty Loop and the Wallkill Reserve there. Well, last fall, and you can see this is February 29th, we had been seeing snow geese down at the Liberty Loop, and then a trail camera caught all these little white things here in Goshen, and you'll see them a little later. And this was their day that they were returning back to Canadian tundra. Like, not only do they breed in Canada, but like in the really far north of Canada. So they spent their winter here, and then they were on their way back. And so this is them, and we'll see them, one or two more times. But they went from the Jersey border up to Goshen. I guess took another little break, and then they kept on going and ended up in Canada. So as winter ends and fall begins, we start to see things like this. Our winter birds start to go, because some of the eagles here are not eagles for all year round. They're Canada's bald eagles, and they'll be going back up to Canada where they will breed. We have blue jays here, but they aren't all our blue jays. We have robins here, but they aren't all our robins. So it's easy to think that oh, blue jays I see them all year round, or robins I see them all year round. But what often happens is our summer robins are in Georgia right now, and Canada's robins are here. So even though you might say, oh, robins are here year round, it isn't necessarily the same birds. It's the species. So somewhere around the end of winter, birds are already thinking of spring, and for some of them that means flying back north. I'll kind of check in with the bald eagles every now and then because they're exciting. Bald eagles are probably courting around this time. Now, they're for a lot of the birds we talk about here, courtship's a yearly thing because every year they're trading up and getting new partners. But a lot of them form lifelong bonds. So, for example, the bald eagles, they can live 30 years and they could stay with one partner for that length of time. So this courtship doesn't have to be a yearly thing. Once they, pick a partner, they could remain with them. And to be honest, I apologize. So I'm going to try to be straightforward with this. But I think as we start going into like all of the different interpersonal relationships between birds, I think it's easy to be judgy. Like, I don't approve of that, or so you do whatever you're by all means, judge away. But one of the judgments I give, like, I think courtship's important, but I would not do this. So bald eagles, then, as winter ends, they're doing lots of things where they'll stroke each other's bills and head and their neck and breast with their bills, etc. But then they'll fly up really high, lock talons. Sorry, I'm so emotional with this. They lock talons and they plummet to the ground, only to like right before they hit, let go and like go opposite directions. And they usually do that in time, but not always, as one might imagine. So out of all of the ways to court, I'm not sure that that is like my firmest stamp of approval. But by winter, they're already hoping to, hi, I'm sure we have seats and I'm sure, let me just kind of open up the next room just in case we need to steal another seat or two. Actually, where's my lesson? So when do birds find a mate? It varies. A lot of the things that I'm going to say vary. Some of them are doing like mallards, they're courting now. They're looking for mates now. So, we're thinking of winter. They're thinking of spring already. Already their heads are green. We'll get them out. But same with the bald eagles. They may like be courting and sorting up now, or when they migrate north, they might be finding there, or when they get here to their summer breeding grounds. But the ones who arrive to breeding grounds single, they may remain single. Like maybe they can find a partner, but even before winter ends, they're looking to find um, a mate. Because when they get back come February, that's a really good month for house cleaning. Like for a lot of us, February is cold. We're not thinking about spring eggs, but the eagles are because they're already fixing up their nest. They're adding to it. If you may remember, bald eagle nests are the largest nests in the world, birds' nests in the world. All right. So they have to pick big trees because every year they just keep making these things heavier and heavier, and they can actually then break the trees at some point, and some of the big branches which comes down. So one eagle nest was used over 60 years and reached a size of 18 square feet. Another nest weighed 2 tons and measured 10 feet high and 8 feet across. And so these images you see here are from the Bashikil last February. I was able to just photograph all these eagles, and if you see, it just has this muck, this grassy stuff, but it's thinking of lining a nest because it's cold, and when they lay their eggs, they don't want their eggs to be vulnerable to the frigid temperatures. So once again, it's February, we're not thinking of spring yet, but they sure are. They're thinking of the eggs that they're going to lay and starting to adjust their eggs. Yes.
Um, what happens if one of the mates dies?
Okay, excellent. So this will come up. It is very common. So among the bald eagles and among the ducks, even if they mate for life, uh, divorce is possible. And the most common observation of divorce is if they aren't successful in breeding that year. All right, so if no eggs are laid, or if no egg, that this pair might separate. So at the Bashikil, there were 3 pairs of eagles that formed nest and laid eggs, but then the middle eagles attacked the nests on either side of them, so that there was only one nest that had young and only one eaglet. So, we could have had 9 eaglets at the Bashikil this year. We had 1 as a result of this. And it's a question whether those other 2 pairs, sometimes that's the impetus for not staying together. If one dies, they can form another partner after that. Bald eagles, swans, that is observed.
I just wonder because I know in the pelicans, as far as I understand, if one mate dies, they don't mate again.
I didn't know that. Interesting.
They mourn for a long time.
Yeah.
Or if they get hurt, they stay with
Hmm.
them.
The pelican, she said, there was one at the Bashikil where I think it got caught in fishing line. It hurt in its wing, but I think its partner, if I heard the story correct, stayed with it and fed it and covered as far as we know. So then by March, all right, bald eagles are laying eggs. So here's one of the nests that did not make it this year. Late March to early May in New York. Oh, I'm sorry. So the eggs are laid in February into March, and then by late March into May, they will hatch. The adults, they're stuck for about a month sitting on the nest. And for a lot of birds, especially the big ones, that means one of the two is sitting on it 24/7. All right, so it's possible that there's like brief moments where there's no eagle on the nest, but that's rare. So here, not only are they pairing for life, but they're equally committed to the survival of the offspring, right? So sometimes there's some variation in that, even though both males and females are sitting on the nest, sometimes it's the female that does more of the sitting overnight, so there can still be some difference in the genders. But once again, so come February, it's not uncommon. There's already bald eagles sitting on a nest, and if you get a really frigid spell, sometimes the nest fails, and it just got too cold, and the eggs froze. And then around this time, we start to see other birds too. So it's the end of February, it's beginning of March. And even though officially it's not spring, the birds start coming back. So if you want to see woodcocks, this is the time of year, the end of February, because you'll never see them again. They come out at night, all right? They walk on the ground. They have these really long bills that they use to find earthworms. And if you remember, you might imagine, if your bill is in soft mud a lot, well, it's easy for predators to find you. So if you look at their eyes, they're farther back on the head than in any other bird. And in fact, their brain has been reorganized. So one part of their brain, the cerebellum, is actually under where it usually is, just to make room for their eyes, which are so far back. And I'm sorry if you can't hear this at home, but not only do they like fly high in the air, the males, to attract the females, but then you'll just hear this call. Sorry, we'll get there. It's called the peent call. So once again, it's fun, and you have one chance to see them every year, and it's at the end of spring. And I'm sorry, TJ, did you raise your hand? Did you have a question?
I do. When is the annual snowy owl eruption? Is it gonna happen this year or no?
So I'm not quite sure what you mean by snowy owl eruption. You
They say
frightened
every
me a
four
little with your choice of
years.
words. I'm sorry.
Uh, it's a migratory thing where older snowy owls push younger ones out so they can
Uh-huh.
fly south to find food. And we're a bit close, like in northwards. So
Oh,
are they gonna
okay.
come in this year? It happens every 4 years.
So I apologize that I don't know. There was one winter, this would be about 10 years ago, where it's like frigid cold. Like if you were going out bird hiking, you were in your ski gear, you had your, layers and hand warmers and stuff. And snowy owls were being seen throughout Orange County. I went out looking. Lots of people saw them. I didn't. So we don't get snowy owls reliably. They can be seen. So I apologize, TJ. I don't know about what that you said. I will talk about swans. We're getting to swans in our next video. They kind of do something like that with their young. So why don't I get to that? So, but I'm sorry, I don't have anything specifically on the snowy owls.
That's okay.
But good question. So here are some videos from the late winter here, and here we have. So these, I'm sorry, so this was from the summer before. There were a number of swans which hatched at the 6.5 Station Sanctuary, and they grew to adulthood. But TJ, as you said, some of them may stay with their parents through the winter, but I'm sorry, these are all the summer pictures. But come this time of year, they're already thinking of their next brood of eggs. So while um, this like the cygnets which have been cared for by their parents for their whole lives all of a sudden find their parents being very aggressive and trying to chase them out, so it must be really confusing. There must be big therapy bills, but the parents are getting ready for the next season. So let's talk about swans, since they're kind of fun ones we can observe here. They live a long time, and they typically pair for life. Now, you're going to get tired of me saying that, because the swans pair for life, and the snow geese will pair for life, and the Canada geese will pair for life. But then we'll start talking about the ducks, and it's the opposite. And one interesting thing that we see a lot is that if you try to tell males and females apart, Canada geese, snow geese, mute swans, it's really hard. They look a lot alike. And we notice some things go along with that trait in that they tend to pair for life, and the males are very active in the care for the young. The young are raised by both the males and the females. In the ducks, males look very different from the females. They tend to only form pair bonds which form a season. So they're monogamous seasonally, but then come the next season, they're with someone else. And the males typically do not help care for the young. In fact, they may be gone even before the eggs hatch. So, as we start with the waterfowl, we start with a couple species where the males and females look alike, and we see one type of courtship going on in spring, and then a different one come the ducks. So, as Dorothy, your question earlier, once again, if a mate dies, the surviving partner may find a new pair. There may be a mourning or a wait until the next season before that happens. But if they haven't mated before, or to reinforce their bond. So sometimes, even though they have a pair bond and someone they're going to stick with for 20, 30 years, you can still see courtship going on and perhaps reinforcing that bond that they have. And so one of the things, I've tried to start doing is it's easy to go to a wetland and you say oh, around this time of the year, oh, I see some mallards. Okay, what else do I see? But if you look, the mallards are courting now. All right, and so you might notice mallards doing weird things like bobbing heads, or males swimming with their heads low to the water and things like that. And so every now and then, and so I think it's tempting to say, oh, mute swans, okay, I know them. Let me look for something else. You may say, oh, it's courting. And then so, even if you know the species, it may be doing something that you're not used to seeing. So they can hold their neck erect and chin uplifted, and they can court over the course of an hour. Do all of these things. So once again, not only nice to see the species, but then also sometimes to notice what they are doing. Now, this next behavior, not only for a partner, but also then for other potentials where a swan will fluff up its wings. So this is, potentially to attract a mate, but also to kind of advertise its territory. And it'll go after Canada geese and anyone else that it sees, including other mute swans at the sanctuary station in Goshen. There were two pairs, and one had the east side, that was its territory, and the other one had the west side, and they didn't get close to each other. And if they did, here you can see a swan going after a Canada goose, which is essentially, this is my territory, get away. So, as we get into spring, here are a number of behaviors which are going on. There's courtship, there's establishing of territory. And then very often you'll say, wait, I think I see a white spot in, the reeds there. And what they've typically done is that they can find a place that's away from land where you might have, say, foxes and things like that, and they make a nest of the vegetation. Once again, they will lay their eggs there, 4 to 10 eggs. And once again, this is a bigger bird, so like the eagles, about a month of sitting on the eggs before we see them hatch. So if you're watching for baby waterfowl, you'll see the ducks first, you'll see the Canada geese second, and you'll see the swans third. Just, it takes the bigger eggs a little longer to develop. All right, so that's what they're doing. Now, some of the birds of Orange County are not here during breeding season, so we miss some stuff. We never see the snow geese breeding because, once again, that's what they're doing in Canada. Now, they might have formed pairs here. So here over winter, maybe they find a partner. And I'm sure I shouldn't say this, but I can't tell them apart. But they can. They know who their partner is. If I had a partner, of a snow goose, I'd lose them. I don't know where they are, but they do it. And even maybe some of the young from the previous year, they can still kind of stay together as a family unit. So they may have a partner that they've mated for life with, or just met here, or even, kids, and they migrate back up to Canada together. And somehow they stay together, which, in flocks like this, it's amazing. I just don't know how it is, it's done. So those are snow geese. We miss their courtship. Canada geese have a lot of similarities to the swans in that, I mean, the males and the females, they look a lot alike. All right. So once again, we associate that with the males are going to care for the young and they're going to mate for life, unlike the ducks that we are about to see. And then as winter goes on, we'll see some courtship behaviors here. One of them, right? In a couple of these, the next ones are all right. So here we see some defensive ones where they're hissing and lowering their necks, but they can swim with their necks lowered. With all of these waterfowl, like the males are going to perform some behaviors, but females can perform behaviors for the males as well and show them that they're encouraging the males. All right, and I'll talk about which females the males might encourage a little bit. But all of a sudden you may say, oh, they're Canada geese. But once again, maybe it's interesting what they're doing. Maybe they're honking at each other and biting each other and fighting in order to try to establish a territory. Summary. But once again, there's behaviors in how they hold their head and their neck as far as encouraging each other and and showing interest, etc. And so some of this is to keep warm. But if you look at their necks, some of that is courtship. Like, hey, is anyone interested? Etc. Just like the swans, you might see one swimming around very visibly. But then if you look really close, you might say, oh, wait, there's a second one there. There's a nest. And whichever parent is on the nest is trying to be as unobtrusive as possible. So here, females are laying a bunch of eggs on a nest that they've made from plant material, and you might miss them. If you were, taking a walk, there was just a bunch of reeds in the middle of a marsh, not realizing, oh, look, there's a parent sitting on the nest there. And then after about a month, and perhaps a little less, then we have goslings. We'll get back to them. So the geese and the swans, they have certain types of relationships. Then we get into the ducks. All right. Now, they're already courting. And you can tell because the male mallards for most of the summer, they look like females. They had a type of plumage known as eclipse plumage. The way to tell the difference is to look at the color of the bill. All right, so the females had an orange bill, the males had a yellow bill, but otherwise they look the same. So you might have said, wow, I haven't seen a male mallard all summer. You did, they just didn't look like males. But testosterone levels start to peak in early fall, and then you start to see them change their plumage, right? Because the hormones are guiding the next molt and the pigments they put in their feathers, but it also then affects their behavior. I mean, testosterone goes lots of places in the body, as does estrogen, including the brain. And so here we have, as testosterone increases, we have all of these then behaviors that are associated with courting, defending territories. And so here you can see, this is actually one of the females' behaviors where they splash a lot to encourage males. So you can see them swimming low to the water. That's a female who's actually encouraging a male. And that male swimming with his head low to the water is advertising to a female. Here's a female chasing another female out of her way. So males can be a little territorial. Females can as well. Now, here's where we're just going to start talking. And once again, you can judge away as you see fit. So they are seasonally monogamous. So they're going to form a partner, but only for the season. And while they're monogamous, will the males stay faithful to the females? Not if they can help it. So mallards are just famous for trying to mate with as many female mallard ducks as they can. And also, to be honest, females of as many other species as they can. Mallards all actually hybridize with a bunch of different species like black ducks and things like that. But then again, the nests tend to have mixed parentage. And so as a male leaves his female to court another, very often another male comes in and the female encourages him and they mate to the point where, the females are mating with other males as well. If one wanted to study this, there seem to be rules in that some males, if they're a little less healthy, if their coloration is a little less vibrant, and you could even then do an experiment where you put some paint on their feathers to make them look a little less colorful, they'll be less likely to find a mate. So there are things about the males that the females are attracted to, and they will pick some other than others. Females are friendlier to some males, higher ranking males than to others, and so they can accept pairing attempts from some and reject those from others. So there's a bunch of studies which have looked at that. Once again, this is true of a lot of birds where, yes, they're kind of supposedly faithful, but if you did DNA analysis of their chicks, you'll find that there are multiple fathers involved. Right. Now, one of the things which is atypical in a lot of these birds, but with mallards it's a little more common, is there are forced copulations. And especially if, a female is by herself, there may be multiple males which will attempt to mate with her. And in the struggle that ensues, the female can spend a lot of time underwater and even drown. All right. And so that's something, associated with mallards, which is not as typical in other ducks. And as I said, if you were to ask what other species might a mallard mate with, there's a list. This is a big list. Most birds try to stay specific to one species because usually once you start mating with other species, you've wasted energy because you won't have viable offspring from that. But mallards would be an exception to that. So I wanted to give an example of, like a swan, a goose, and a duck. But obviously then there's lots of ducks. And there's, nuance. Here are the ringneck ducks. So let me just kind of talk about them before their courtship. These are early migrants. So if that's not something that you're, familiar with, the spring migration isn't a time that they all come together. There are some that you could expect. There's still snow on the ground. There's still ice on the water. I'm going to see the ringnecks and I might see some pintails, but I'm not going to see the widgeons and I'm not going to see the, the ruddy ducks until later. And so, come February, you might start end of February, you might see the next season of ducks. But this migration might go on through, end of May, but that doesn't mean you're going to see all of the ducks during that long time. You might see the ringneck ducks, while it's still cold, et cetera. So here's a deeper water duck. I haven't seen any come through yet. So they tend to be late in autumn and early in spring. And I haven't seen them yet this autumn at the places I've been out. So if you want to go out, I missed my my waterfowl migration. I think you would pointed out, Candace, that the ruddy ducks have been seen here in big numbers. I haven't seen any yet, but ruddy ducks and the ringneck ducks, they would become later. So you have missed a couple of species if you haven't gone out lately, but a couple are still coming, and they'll often be the first ones through here as well. Okay. Now, once again, we don't see them breed. They're going up north of us to Canada, and so that's where they're going to lay their eggs, et cetera. So a lot of our species, we don't see them here. But here we can see a lot of ducks, a lot of unpaired males. So there are some females. The females are the ones that are brown in color. But in that last thing, you notice mostly males. So it looks like males that haven't yet found a partner advertising themselves, et cetera. As before we leave the ducks, because we'll get back to them when we talk about ducklings a little later, there's nuances with all of them. So one of the nuances is wood ducks like cavities. They are cavity nesters. A bunch of birds are. They need a hole. All right. So bluebirds will be like that. Some of the wrens will be like that. The swallows are like that. So they're not just going to form a nest in a tree. They want a hole. Problem is there aren't always enough holes in a habitat, especially since we've been cutting down the big trees. Like, as in recent centuries, the number of big trees in this area has markedly gone down. So where do you find big holes? Well, if you can't find enough of a big hole, wood ducks often do something called brood parasitism. Oh, and just a quick shout out is obviously if there's not enough big holes, one of the things you can do is put up nest boxes, and we have a nest box constructor extraordinaire over there who's putting up wood duck boxes and for the bluebirds, et cetera. So kudos. Now you say like, ooh, that's a lot of young for this female to have. Well, interesting story is because these holes are hard to find. Let's say a female says, all right, here's my hole. I've laid all of the eggs that I'm comfortable raising. I'm good. You know what? I think I still have a few more eggs in me. Tell you what I'm going to do. I'm going to go to my neighbor's hole and lay my eggs there so that she ends up raising my offspring. This is something known as brood parasitism. And a number of birds do it to varying degrees, but wood ducks do it a lot. All right. And so it is very common. Like you can see this nest has mixed parentage, but in wood ducks, it's very common to have mixed maternity as well. Now, this is like one of the fascinating things, but this would, you'd sort of have to read the scientific literature. Why would they do that? Well, some wood ducks never do. All right, some females don't do that. Some females always do that. And other females, depends on the year. Last year they laid their eggs in the nest of others, and this year they didn't. So there's some things going on. All right, so birds vary. The odds will increase if a female had previously nested there. So when they come back from migration, they might say, aha, here's the nest box that I used last year, but now another duck might have beat them to it. But if that was where they laid their eggs last year, maybe that increases the odds that they'll lay extra eggs in that one this year. First year females are a little more likely to do it. And then there are some other factors which can vary. So just as, these things are common among, birds, courtship and the laying of eggs and taking care of young. But as we start looking at the different species, you can see some individual differences. Yes, you had a question.
Is she surprised that, oh, there are 3 more eggs in my nest, or does she know it and I'll raise them anyway?
So once again, so this is tough, and it's tough to speak without judgment because if any of you have dated, and I'm sure you do, like speaking of how birds date, it's easy to get judgment in there. If any of you are parents, then speaking about how like at some point, your values start to. So speaking of this, ducks don't care as much as other birds would. And one of the things we notice about ducks is that the young are pretty self-sufficient. All right, because like if you have like a red-winged blackbird, the parent has to feed that bird. The parent just has to work and catch bugs because there's no way that baby is, becoming functional unless it is just fed. So that bird is very interested in not raising someone else's offspring. But ducks are often self-sufficient a day after the day that they're hatched. So there is some risk to the female. And by this point, it is only the females caring for the young. There's like maybe 1 or 2 duck species that are different. I think ruddy ducks might be. But apart from 1 or 2 species, the males have gone. All right. They guarded the nest while the female was sitting on it. But usually before the eggs hatch, the males are out of the picture, hanging out with other males, doing whatever they do. And the females are now the only ones with the eggs. So there is some additional risk to her, like from predators, et cetera. But other than that, the young are feeding themselves. So perhaps that's why it's tolerated a bit more with ducks. Also, once again, we'd have to do studies, and this is hard. But in some studies, who's coming to Goshen? Well, a lot of birds are returning to where they hatched. But if these ducks are living 10, 20 years, then some of the females might be the daughters or the granddaughters of, or the sisters or, or whatever. So by laying your eggs in someone else's nest, in one sense, bad, but then in the other sense, you're raising your nieces, and your nieces, or your relatives, and so once again, maybe it's not so bad. So, lots of things to potentially consider going on there. So while this is going on in the water, let's just kind of check in around. Everybody is nesting at this time. Spring is our nesting season because this is when the food is available. The bugs are out now. There's going to be berries, and you want your young to be able to fly by the time it gets cold. So it's, it is possible in a really good year that some of the small songbirds could, hey, like I've had one really good, brood of eggs in spring. Here I am in early summer. Let's try again and try for a second brood. So that does happen. But for the most part, brooding is going on in spring only, especially in the bigger birds. Like so, an eagle or a swan, if they laid eggs in summer, it wouldn't get to the right developmental stage by the time it started getting cold. So here we see at Croton Park, about an hour from here, here's a red-wing hawk nest. There you can see one parent staying with them. Remember that in all of the raptors, the females are bigger. All right, so that they can both take care of the young. Females are usually larger, and so like especially with the eagles, then there comes a point where the young are bigger than the male too, so that the father at the nest is the smallest bird there. Now, two things that get associated with this, and just I used this example before, but if you weren't here, if you were ever, after a bird walk or a nice, talk you attended at the college or whatever, that you went out with the other people at your table and you said, oh, let's get a drink or a coffee or something, and then you asked like, maybe I asked this person out, and then I asked the question, wait, did you ever say, wait, is this a member of my species? Okay, and then most people smirk. But that's an important question, not for us humans. All right, that if someone looks human, they are. I mean, there used to be other species of Homo around throughout the world, but not anymore. There's just one. So if someone looks human, they're a member of our species. But just last month, you could go to the sanctuary up there. There were a dozen species of duck in the same month on the same pond. That's a lot of potential sex partners who are wrong. If you try to mate with another species, your efforts are probably wasted. All right, the young aren't going to be healthy. They won't be hatched alive. And so one of the things that we associate with all of these birds then is specific types of courtship rituals that kind of say, hey, I'm a member of your group. So females, no, I like the males that do like this. Or I like the males that sound like that, where there will be a courtship song. So some of these birds are a little shyer, like the pied-billed grebe. You'll hear them far more frequently than you'll see them. All right, but that's it. But if you can hear them from a half a mile away, then all of the female pied-billed grebes can hear the male from a half a mile away as well. So spring is much more musical than other times of year, and best among that are the warblers. So once again, bird watchers often have a soft spot in their hearts for the warblers, and bird watchers may be depressed for months because you may go some months without seeing a warbler, and then all of a sudden you get to late March, early April, and you say, aha, I see a palm warbler, my first one of 2025. So these were named for being on palm trees, but that's where they are in winter. They're in the Caribbean by palm. So once again, where is this bird from? Well, it has a breeding range and it has a non-breeding winter range. Just like if you ask someone where they're from, they might say, well, I do this in Florida in winter, but I come up here to Orange County in summer. So a lot of birds do that. So the palm warbler is named for being near palm trees in the winter. Obviously, it's just passing through Orange County, going up to boreal forests in northern Canada, so it doesn't do any palm trees here. Now, it's unusual in that it can feed on bugs on the ground. Most warblers feed on insects on leaves, so most warblers aren't going to come just yet. They're going to come until the leaves are out. That's why the palm warbler, or the first ones you're going to see, they can feed on the ground. They don't have to wait for bugs to be on leaves. And so I mentioned this last time. Sometimes if you just have a strategy, because if you look at your bird book, you say, there are so many kinds of warbler. How am I going to learn them all? But if it's early spring, you say, I'm only going to see two. All right, there's going to be palm warblers maybe and yellow-rumped warblers. Those are the first two I'm going to see. And so when you go out, it's not as daunting. You're not looking for like which of the 30 species might it be. It's like, no, we're just looking for two. And this is the second one, the yellow-rumped warbler, sometimes called the butterbutt. And you can see why. Now, this is a fun time of year because the male plumage is brightest in spring because they're trying to impress the females. All right, so they're trying to, A, show the females what species they belong to. Because once again, if you've got 30 species of warbler, all right, the female warblers, they're confused. They're like, all these males are making courtship songs. Who do I mate with? So they're listening to what kind of song. They like males that say, witchity, witchity, witch, but not males that say, sweet, 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 I'm so sweet. So they know by the song. But also they can tell by the colors. As I mentioned before, yellows, oranges, and reds have something in common when it comes to birds. Birds don't make those pigments. Birds don't have genes that say yellow or red So that's coming from the food they eat from the plant material and pigments which are called carotenoids. So the same things, like if you ate too many carrots, like there could be like an oranging of your skin. And so birds, they just, they eat carotenoids from the fruits that they eat, and then they use that as they manufacture pigments. So females can look at males and get an idea of how healthy they are. All right, because a red cardinal or an orange Baltimore Oriole or the yellow on these warblers, they can only make those bright colors if they're well fed. So females, there's all these males singing courtship, and they say, nah, you don't look healthy. No, I think I can do better. And then so it's kind of a true sense of advertising. So some things in courtship don't matter. Like the bird does this with its wing, and like it's not going to make it a better parent or whatever. But the color actually does. It's a healthier bird, when it has these brighter colors. So spring is such a great time, especially for the warblers, because you're like, oh, there's all of these brighter colors. In autumn, they're just duller. Oh, but look at, then we got yellow, we got olive on the back. Here's another example. Red starts in autumn, they're kind of boring. All right, but if you look in summer, like, just like sometimes called the Halloween bird, just like black and orange, just like bright colors. So this is a fun time to see them because the males are brighter in color. B, the males are trying to attract females and defend territory, so they're making noise. All right, so like you can hear that there's a bird, and maybe you learn some of the songs. If you have your phone, you can say, "Hey Merlin, what bird is this?" And you can say, "Ooh, that's one I don't know. Let me like pause here." So just the song helps them, but very often now they're sitting on a branch out in the open, and look, the leaves aren't fully out yet. So like I used to say, it's still kind of a little chilly. I'll wait till I'll wait till May and it gets a little warmer and I'll go bird watching. April's a great time, right? Because they're making noise. You can see them. There aren't leaves out yet. Because like once they mate and the eggs, like the males are going to stop singing. Like their goal was to attract a female. They started a brood of eggs. They'll sing less. They're done. Now they're up in the high trees. There's leaves. You're not going to see them. So these are common birds in our area, but once again, spring is when you're going to see the American redstart and so many other things. So here it is a little later in the season. As you might imagine, just they're going to blend in with the leaves a little bit better. Okay. So then so all of the males are making songs, and we've talked about this before. The yellow warblers, which are in here somewhere, their song is famous for having the cadence of sweet, 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 I'm so sweet. But look at it, it's all by itself on a branch. Like that's because it's trying to be showy for a female. Like, hey, females, here I am. Look, nothing, obscuring your view. Here I'm making as much noise as I can. So it makes your birding really easy. Once the eggs are laid, it's not going to sit where there's no leaves, where predators can see it. It's not going to make noise. So so spring is a great time to go birding. Now, I do this, I kind of feel bad. I'm sure a lot of us do. Like when I think of a redstart, that's what I think of. All right, that's a redstart. But yeah, that's the male redstart. When I think of a yellowthroat, that's a yellowthroat with the big black mask there. But just, this is harder and maybe not where you start off with birders, but female birds matter too. They're not going to do what I just said. They're not going to sit on a branch with no leaves. They're not going to make a whole lot of noise. They're not going to try to defend a territory. And they're not as brightly colored. So a lot of times you're just going to miss them. But obviously they're there. And if you're a bird watcher at some point, you might want to say, wait, I like the male redstarts. What do the females look like? And they don't have black. They have more of an olive and they have more yellow here. The common yellowthroat, the males have this bright black mask that you can see. So they're called a yellowthroat because their throat is yellow, but it's the black mask which makes them obvious. But if you look at a female, you can see that they don't have the mask, but they still have the yellow throat. So look, it's kind of just a little harder to see her. All right, because she's in there. You can notice there's the yellow throat, hence the name. Birds are making a lot of song at this time, and that's good because some birds are shy and like the tops of trees. So here's images of red-eyed vireos. They're not easy to see. All right, they're high in the trees. Sometimes for birders, like I do this, if you see me on a bird walk, where you go psh, 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 and sometimes the birds say like, "Ooh, who's invading my territory?" and they come to check you out. But then other birds just don't do that. Vireos don't do that. So they're high in the trees. It's really hard to see them, but they make a lot of songs. So once again, you might say, ooh, red-eyed vireos today, or warbling vireos they're next. Whereas once they stop singing, you know, they'll be there. But if they're at the top of the tree and they're quiet, or so that's a really hard bird to notice. It's shy. It's kind of like a grayish olive in color, this warbling vireo, but it makes a really pretty song. So there are a lot of birds that you will hear far more often than you see, and springtime's the time to do that. So getting back to the water, here we are a little later in the season, and we're starting to see northern shovelers and the blue-winged teals. Now, so this is from the station last spring, right up the road. I showed you videos of autumn northern shovelers last week, and their bills were bigger. They look like mallards, but their bills were bigger. But here you just see the colors. Vibrant colors. Same thing with the blue-winged teals. Blue-winged teals are hard to tell. They were here about a month ago. But look at the white stripe on their face. Look at the slate gray head. So once again, just birding is fun in the spring. Birds that are, once again, these ducks in autumn, you know, just they all look like female mallards, but some are a little bigger and some have this little spot. Whereas in spring, much more vibrant. Now, when does spring start? Well, actually, the teals, they're early. They look like this now. A month ago, they didn't really. They still look very drab. But the males look like this now because they're already thinking of courtship for the winter. So ducks, you know, and other birds vary in when testosterone kicks in and when they start seeking out partners. A lot of them are already trying to partner up for next year, even though winter is not on us here. You can see obviously why they're called the green-winged teal. And that's different from the blue-winged teal, which are just lovely birds. They aren't as common, so if you see them, they've got nice blue on their wings. Yeah, so there you can see like some blue on their wings. I slowed it down. Now, the green-winged teals, blue-winged teals, American widgeons, you see them in spring, and then you don't see them because they won't spend their summer here. All right, so there are birds who spend their winter here, but their summers are north in Canada. There are birds which will come here, lay their eggs, and spend all summer here. But then there are birds that are just passing through. All right, they wintered south of us, but they will lay their eggs north of us. So that, you know, this widgeon, nice to see it, but you can see it in the spring and you can see it in the autumn, and that's it. All right, the blue-winged teals, the green-winged teals, the same thing, although green-winged teals can stay a little bit longer. But then, all right, so then we can also start seeing the birds which are going to be here all summer and lay their eggs. So here is a common gallinule. All right, so like, oh, okay, here's one of our summer birds back again. And then you say, oh, green herons, right, I haven't seen them in a while. All right, great blue herons actually might have stayed all winter. Green herons won't. All right, so it's like, oh yeah, and they're cute when they raise their head feathers like that. We'll see them again. Here's an American coot. Once again, another bird that, you know, in spring you get to hear from a long distance away, so perhaps more likely to see them. Now, notice what it's doing. It's just hitting the surface of the water for the bugs, right? Because plants and bugs are funny in spring. Very often there's just like a burst of activity. So there is a time where like the plants say, all right, let's put out our leaves really quickly. And they want to do it quickly because when leaves first form, they don't have all of the defenses against bugs that want to eat them that they will later. So they want to like their leaves to get mature so they can defend against potential predators. The bugs are trying to become, come out of their eggs at that time. Let's get the leaves when they're vulnerable. So the bugs are trying to do this burst of activity. And all of the migratory birds, they want to hit that, all right? So that all of these birds, everybody's trying to time this, all right, where the plants are like, ooh, let's put out our leaves here. And the bugs are thinking, let's hatch when the plants are doing their leaves. And the birds are trying to come back from Georgia or South America or wherever. And they're thinking, let's try to hit the population boom of those bugs here. And you know what? I apologize. I just made this playlist and I just thought of one that would show that really. I think I can find it. So it's either here, yeah. Yeah. So this is like Wallenpaupack on the Pennsylvania side, maybe an hour from here. But if you look at the surface of the water, there's all of these bugs, right? Because when the bugs come out, they are out. Like and my daughter ran track, and just one of the funniest things was they were just clouds of bugs, just clouds. And they're like at one end of the track, and then you can see like everyone running around the track, and then you see them hit the cloud, and they're all like, oh, because they inhaled a whole bunch of bugs, everyone. But there's just a gazillion of them. And look at all of these gulls. They don't stay there in the summer. They timed it. All right. They're like, all right, we want to land on Lake Powell and Polpack when the bugs come out, and we'll just eat bugs like nobody's business. And that'll give us all of the energy that we need to swim the next leg of the journey. When we talk about climate change next week, that's one of the problems, because the birds which are overwintering in like the Caribbean and South America, they're going to come back next spring the same time they always do, same time they have forever. But if it's warmer every year, the bugs are changing every year. And when they come back, they missed it. They missed their window. They're not getting as much nutrition on their way back. So it's harder for them to get back to their breeding range. They lay fewer eggs. And we can talk more about that next time. So springtime is often, I wanted to talk about the bugs. I'm sorry, the birds. But obviously a lot of the birds are eating the bugs. So this is a flycatcher. Obviously the name flycatcher, they are very in tune, or what are the insects doing here. Getting back to nesting just a little bit, you have to defend your nest. So even if the females are doing most of like some work with like sitting on the eggs, the males are often defending the nest, because hawks flying over, lots of things love to eat eggs and baby birds. And so if a hawk gets anywhere near a marsh, all of the red-winged blackbird males just kind of, it's called mobbing, to chase it out. So even though the hawk is much bigger than they are trying to get the hawks out of here. Here's a little bird called a kingbird going after a bald eagle. Then you'll see a kingbird going after an osprey. Same thing. If a bird is flying overhead, it gets to see where all the nests are. And again, very easy now to pick off the eggs. But if any big bird gets anywhere close to your nest, you kick them out, and that way you're protecting your eggs. On the eggs, two big variations, and it's two extremes, but then there's also a lot in the middle. You can be altricial or precocial. By that I mean these are red-winged blackbirds. They are useless, all right, for a long time until like they have to be fed, all right. So they will die without their parents' care. On the other end of the spectrum are the ducks, right? These precocial young. I mean, they're pretty active on their own. In fact, I'm sorry, I'm impressed by this. Wood ducks, they lay their eggs in cavities, and this can be in like tree holes. Like they can be 40 feet in the air. This nest cavity in a tree hole. When wood ducks hatch, their first day of life, they get to the edge of the hole and they jump to the ground, which could be 40 feet below. So you think of what a lot of animals do on their first day of life, making a 40-foot leap. All right, that's pretty impressive. So a lot of these other birds, they're useless for a long time. So as far as what goes into taking care of your young, we've got these two extremes. And then we also have some, stages in the middle too, where birds are kind of independent but still fed a little bit. And so I mean, if you look at these baby goslings, they're not like the red-winged blackbirds, where like the only food that they get are what the parents bring them. Here they are feeding on their own. So as we start getting later in the into the early summer, we'll see, oh, here the ducks are out. All right, so here we see all of the little ducklings. And then a little bit later, oh, the goslings are out, and the baby Canada geese. And a little bit later, oh, the baby swans are out, the cygnets. At the same time, just checking back with our bold eagle friends. Here we are, we're the end of March going into April, and now the young have hatched. Now they're kind of small at first. So as the parents bring all this food, a lot of times the weight of the fish at the nest actually outweighs the birds, because the parents are like, oh, my kids are going to be well fed, and they bring too much food. But then as this progresses, this will change. So that's a baby bald eagle. They're much darker at first. In fact, they won't get the white head and tail until about 5 years of age. And they're not going to like be able to leave the nest until June. So you've got months to observe them. And just a little shout out, the Bashakil organizes, and obviously it depends on the eagles where they put their nest, but organizes volunteers with a spotting scope on weekends. So if you're strolling by, people will welcome you and say, hey, would you like to see bald eagles through the spotting scope? If you never got to see them, you get to see them on the nest. And actually, because they're there, from March into early June, you can just watch them develop. And like, oh, they're getting a little bigger. Here's an adult feeding them. It's kind of fun to check in regularly here. Now, there's, some darker tales as well in that adults will feed the biggest one first, all right? So if this is a brood of 3 baby eaglets, the third one might not make it. So that's fairly common. By the end, life for the male is getting a little tough because he's the smallest one there. So he may not be allowed to eat at the nest. He may kind of dump his food and then go and eat his meal far away because he's just kind of harassed by, birds which are bigger than he is. The female and now the young are getting pretty big as well. One of the fun things to see is they'll start practicing flapping their wings and their flight muscles, and this will take weeks. And so once again, if you get a chance, it's a fun activity in late spring to kind of just watch these eagles start to move around a little more, practice their flapping their wings, etc. There are things which are predictable, and there are things which are unpredictable. We had some little blue herons stop by the sanctuary last spring and the previous fall, and they're white in the fall and they're blue in the spring. And that's unusual. So why are they here? They're usually like farther south of this. Is it like climate change and getting warmer? Not sure. So, here I am saying, here's the sequence of events. It might be, there are always changes. I'll just zip through some of these. As birds go through, a lot of them won't stay. So the greater and lesser yellowlegs, they'll come through, they're eating a lot, but Orange County is important to give them nourishment for the next stage of their migration. They don't lay their eggs here, they go north of us. So, that big sandpiper, the yellowlegs does, but then here are some other sandpipers as well. Now, the spotted sandpiper will stay with us. They're here somewhere, I swear. Okay, I hit everyone but the spotted. Anyway, spotted sandpipers will stay with us, but all of these other ones are just migrating through. Now, we've spent all of these weeks talking about birds, so obviously I can't recap each species, from the past 13 weeks, here. But once again, just a beautiful time of year. Very often the male coloration is brighter than it will be in the autumn. They're going to sit in obvious places making sound as opposed to hiding in treetops. So, the Baltimore Orioles, etc. Wonderful. If you're lucky, you can actually get to see them mate. All right, so obviously there's a mating season as well. So here are tree swallows mating along the Heritage Trail, very close to your nesting box that you put up. They were mating right outside. So kudos once again. Once again, some of these birds are cavity nesters. All right, so if you have nest boxes, they like those. Otherwise, they would be seeking out, hollow spots in trees. But then some are different, and some you'll find along the Delaware in the banks of rivers and the like. Every group of bird is going to be different. So there were sparrows, which were here over winter, and then we'll see different sparrows in the warmer months. So chipping sparrows, you'll see them in the warmer months, not so much in the winter. Field sparrows, you won't see in the winter. You'll see them in the warmer months. Song sparrows are here all year, but these things are called song sparrows because they just sing and sing and sing. They make 2,000 songs a day, the males. All right, so springtime especially. It's big for them. And then some sparrows are just coming through on their way farther north, like savanna sparrows. And as I start to transition, you're getting into summer now, and now some of these birds are adults now. They're leaving the nest. The bald eagles are coming close to fledging. And so for a while in summer, you see a whole lot of the same stuff. But all of a sudden, as summer starts getting a little later, you say, wait a minute, what are these guys doing here? And they're kind of starting their fall migration, even though it's summer, because they grew up in Jersey. But now they're saying, hey, before we start flying south, let's spread out in every direction. So some of them come into Orange County and we'll see great egrets here, but not in July. This will be more of an August thing. These little birds, the end of July, I saw them last year. You might say, what are they doing here? They only migrate through, and it's, oh, their migration is starting in July. And interestingly, this is unusual, the males are taking care of the young for the least sandpipers. So the least sandpipers, they lay their eggs, and then the females, see ya, we're gonna start our migration. The males take care of the young, and then when these little birds, like when the young are independent, the males can say see ya and start their migration. And then the juveniles, which hatch that year, they're going to have to eat a lot and build up their muscle mass before they can migrate. So migration might actually occur in a couple of waves. And here's an unusual one where the females would actually go first. Two last videos is as summer ends. Obviously, autumn migration is fun, but summer might get a little bit boring in that not only are a lot of the male birds not making noises, they're not making courtship songs, they're high in the treetops, but also the males often change their coloration to what's called eclipse plumage. So what kind of mallards are those? You'd think they were females, but then you look close, it's like, oh no, the orange bill, that's the female. The male has the yellow mustard bill. Because the male got a green head to impress the females so that they could mate and she could lay eggs. The female's not doing that at this time of year. So the male's thinking, why do I need a green head? The only thing that would do is attract predators to my prey. Like, I don't need a green head. So males not only have their breeding plumage, they have eclipse plumage, which we'll see in late summer going into August. So in late summer, birding might get a little duller and that there's just fewer colors going on there. All right. Even wood ducks, which, you think wood ducks, the males are so brilliant. Look at that. That's such a beautiful duck. Right. That's its breeding plumage is beautiful. Look at that. That's a male in summer, in July. All right. Not trying to be beautiful because, no females are interested. So why should I bother, trying to make myself all pretty? And so if you're birding in July, maybe a little less, coloration going on. But then as summer ends, as we know, all of a sudden here come all of these birds, which we haven't seen in a while. So that's exciting, but also sad because a lot of our summer birds that eat bugs are now starting to go farther south because as it starts getting cold, the food sources are shifting, right? And so, my goal was to kind of between last week and this week, just kind of if you're bird watching in Orange County, what do we look at different seasons of the year? Because that was a lesson I learned like decades later than I should have, that every season is good for birding. You see different things, and sometimes you don't see as many things, but there are certain birds you only see in winter. A lot of birds you only see migrating through in autumn or summer. So if you're just waiting for it to be really nice weather in summer, there's a lot of Orange County birds that you won't get to see that year. All right, so every season has its beauties. And if you're a beginner birder just getting a strategy, hey, I'm going out in the season, these are the birds I'm likely to see, not these. So, you look at your big bird book, it's not as intimidating as you might otherwise think. So I'd like to thank you for coming. Next week, I'd like to look at the environmental issues which are affecting birds. And that would be the end of like the presentation part. But I'd like to add one more week on the end, that kind of like a town hall. So if anyone had stories about birds or other wildlife or pictures or whatever to come and show them, you could email them to me so we could call them up here, or just, make it, we'd love to hear your stories and, share your excitement as well. So if anyone had questions, feel free to ask. I'm just going to take a quick head count, but I'd like to thank you all for coming.
Thank you.
Thank you. And I think there might have been some chat questions. So TJ, is anything else? What happens when daytime birds are chirping around? Ooh, so the question, what happens if you have to go? I certainly understand. So thank you for coming. The question, what happens when birds are chirping at night? Our street lights are messing up a lot of them, where like these song sparrows, they sing all day and night comes and they're like, oh, at least I get to rest. But where there are street lights, they might get confused and they might just sing 24 hours a day, which just has to be exhausting. So that was an answer to your question. Any other questions? Thank you so very much for coming. Thank you.
Thank you.